Good evening, everybody. I'm Joy Maman. I'm from CMC Vellore. Thank you all for joining this session. We will wait a couple of minutes so that we get our co-chairs on board. And
Hi, Dr. Maman. I haven't met you, I think.
yeah, this is the first time.
Uh,
Shall we start off as per our plan, ma'am? Would you like to go first with the opening remarks?
yeah, I can. So shall we start now? Shall I start?
Please go ahead, Dr. Nand.
Yes, ma'am. We are on time. Yes.
Okay. So, good evening to all of you. Since yesterday you have been listening to AI application in any field that you think of, and I used to run away from AI, but now I realize that there's no other way. You have to actually learn something about it so that you are, knowledgeable enough to meet the demand when it comes to ethics, etc. There have been international documents, mainly from WHO, on AI as applicable for healthcare. It also, for AI for generating evidence, and then also application of ethics, governance, and regulation. So ICMR also has brought out a document which states about its application in diagnosis, screening, treatment, care, epidemiology, and whatnot. But the latest to hit the scene is the document from UNESCO, the revised Universal Declaration of Bioethics and Human Rights, which has actually incorporated three main topics, that is AI, One Health, and gender equality. So the definition of bioethics, they have slightly changed by saying that it's an area of human thinking and social intervention, and is connected to biolaw, besides having an interdisciplinary perspective. That's not in so many words, but it conveys this meaning. So it becomes important that AI has to be recognized, and how we can utilize it. Uh, um, that is what we have to work out jointly across the world. What I heard in the earlier session actually upset me quite a bit as to what can happen if, don't take care of the governance part of its application. So, and also about how AI can actually create lesser jobs and make people think less, and they become more and more dependent on the machine for your diagnosis and things like that. When straight away looking at the patient, you can diagnose what he is having, but you depend on the machine to tell you that you are correct. So that's a sort of approach which is happening now, and we have to be cautious in future, especially with its application in healthcare. With that, I would like to hand over to my co-chair, Dr. Joy Maman, and we have three speakers in this session. Over to you, Joy Maman.
Thank you, Dr. Nandini. I'm Joy Mamin. I'm a pathologist by training. I work at Christian Medical College, Vellore. I work in the Department of Transfusion Medicine and Lab Hematology, and it is my privilege and an honor to be co-chair on this session today. I must confess that the depth of my knowledge in bioethics is only what has accrued over the years and some training sessions here at CMC. It is a new area. However, the intersection of AI and ethics, I think it's a very important area. And our session is very interestingly titled as Health AI, diving deeper into ethics and human rights matters. And I think, as Dr. Nandini mentioned, perhaps we're not experts at this stage, but we certainly should be able to understand nuances and to be able to hold the conversation because the onslaught is, and I use that word very deliberately, it is virtually an onslaught in the healthcare domain of new technologies, and the pace is very severe. And unless we build our own capacities as we have in the past, I think we will find ourselves lacking, and perhaps the patients who come to us for care might not go away as satisfied or as fulfilled as they have in the past. Thank you all to the attendees who are here on a Saturday evening. This is a very important session, I think. And over yesterday and today, the sessions that I attended were really eye-opening and brings new perspective. We have very good speakers. So we will start with today's session. I'd like to request Dr. Nandini to introduce the speakers for the first plenary session. We have two speakers during the session. Over to you, Dr. Nandini.
Thank you, Dr. Mamin. The two keynote addressees today for the first part of this session are Andreas Rice and Rohit Malpani. They will talk on the theme of contours of health, AI ethics, and justice issues and ways to address local and global perspectives of users and developers. Let me introduce them first. Andreas Alois Rice. I hope, Andreas, I'm pronouncing your name correctly. He is the co-lead of the Health Ethics and Governance Unit in the Research for Health Department of the Division of the Chief Scientist at WHO in Geneva, Switzerland. After medical studies and practice in internal medicine in Germany, France, and Chile, he pursued studies in health economics and obtained a postgraduate degree in biomedical ethics. His main area of work is public health ethics with a focus on ethical aspects of infectious diseases and outbreaks of emerging pathogens. Other topics include the ethics of public health surveillance, health research, and big data and artificial intelligence. He has lectured and organized trainings for WHO in more than 50 countries and is serving on the editorial boards of Public Health Ethics and Monash Bioethics Review. He has published widely and is the co-editor of 4 books on bioethics and public health ethics. Dr. Rohit Malpani is an independent consultant based in Paris, working on the ethics and governance of artificial intelligence in health, antimicrobial resistance, and access to medicines. Previously, he was the director of policy for the Medicine Sans Frontiers Access Campaign, a special advisor at Oxfam, and an intellectual property attorney for the law firm Wilson Sonsini in Palo Alto, California. He has a doctorate of jurisprudence from the New York University School of Law. And I'm sure these two will make this session very interesting. So before I ask them to speak, let me introduce myself also, which I actually forgot to mention, that I have had my bioethics training in University of Toronto. Basically, I'm a medical graduate, and I was working in the Indian Council of Medical Research for some years. And after retirement also, I have been actually working in the area of ethics as well as traditional medicine research. And in that capacity, I think I had some interaction with Andreas, if you can recall that, long time back. Over to you, Andreas and Rohit.
Thank you very much. And Andreas and I are going to be presenting together. I will start the presentation and then Andreas will follow. So we wanted to start first by just really giving a thank you for inviting us to speak at this conference. It's really a privilege for us to be able to share our work and also to learn from your perspectives and to have a conversation. I'm going to share my screen in order to share some slides that we've prepared for today. Great. Great. So it sort of alongside the presentation title that's been given, we thought the best way that we could convey the subject matter for today by sort of providing an overview of the work that we have done over the last 6 years, and also to talk about the challenges and opportunities we see in the time ahead. I'll start by first noting that back in 2017, actually, is when the WHO first started to look at the issues around the ethics and governance of artificial intelligence for health. And subsequently, in 2019, we formed an expert group that is drawn from people all over the world, including from India. One of our co-chairs is Dr. Partha Majumdar, and one of our other members since the inception of the expert group is Dr. Roli Mathur. But we also have drawn experts and individuals from other regions and other disciplines across the world. And they have really performed the sort of foundational work in helping the WHO think through the different issues that the organization and governments have to address to ensure that artificial intelligence is really focused much more on the promise and not some of the risks that I think you were just discussing in the last and previous sessions. So based on the work of the expert group from really the founding of the group in 2019, we published our first guidance on the ethics and governance of artificial intelligence for health in 2021. And this was really a first opportunity, really at a time at which, you know, the uses of artificial intelligence for health were as much sort of an idea as they were a reality, to try to not only identify the things that we thought were of concern and opportunity, but also to sort of try to project out into the future. And so this publication really was a chance to do that, and hopefully to provide a way forward for how the WHO and others could think about these issues. And one of the first things that we did was, as an expert group, was try to identify what we consider to be the key ethical challenges with the use of artificial intelligence for health. And this really lays out what we think are the 10 primary challenges that we see with the use of AI. And that not only applies to forms of artificial intelligence that were available and widely used in, around 2020, but I think to a large extent also applies to the use of AI for the use of generative artificial intelligence, which we'll talk more about. I won't run through all of these, but maybe just to note a few. So, I was able to listen to part of the last panel, and one of the things that I think was rightly being discussed is sort of the opportunity cost of using artificial intelligence when it may actually not be proven to work adequately and actually could have certain detriments compared to existing interventions that may be at a lower cost, may be highly effective, and have not yet been used. So really one of the first things that has to be thought about and that raises some serious ethical concerns is, should AI be used compared to other interventions? And also this is partially because artificial intelligence, to the extent it provides benefits, really could only benefit certain populations for which there's sufficient infrastructure to make use of these technologies, whether we're talking both about devices, internet speeds, and other infrastructure. And so artificial intelligence could replicate in a way the digital divide and actually make it worse if the benefits are not distributed fairly. There are also a series of concerns with the collection and use of data. Is the data collected in a way that is consistent with an individual's privacy and autonomy? Are we collecting sufficient data to make sure that it is actually going to be applicable, and so that the algorithm is going to be applicable and effective for populations whose data otherwise may not be captured? And is data that's being collected for the use of artificial intelligence for health ultimately being used for other purposes for which an individual did not consent? We all know that there are many concerns with bias and discrimination associated with AI. And this can be for different reasons. It can be because who designs the AI may really be only from a narrow subset of individuals who only carry one perspective into the choices that they make in designing an algorithm. It can be based upon the data that is used to train an algorithm, in that it may only be drawn from certain populations that ultimately make many other populations either excludable or invisible. And it can also be based on how an algorithm is actually tested and ultimately deployed. It may only be appropriate in certain contexts. And that means in other contexts where it could have a benefit, it ultimately doesn't work or it works poorly. One of the emerging concerns with artificial intelligence, especially as we get more sort of information of its impacts, is it has a significant environmental footprint, both in terms of its carbon emissions and its use of water to cool data centers. And this is actually creating significant concerns in water-stressed communities, and it's also raising concerns because newer forms of artificial intelligence require a large amount of energy. And finally, we know that artificial intelligence involves companies at levels of sizes, or at all sizes. It can be from very small companies to some of the largest companies in the world. And to the extent that very large companies are developing algorithms for healthcare and then sort of operating or distributing them in many contexts, it can raise concerns that we are ultimately seeing a sort of competition for power over healthcare systems between governments and ministries of health versus technology companies, which may have more resources and knowledge in some respect, as we move towards systems that are based on digital health and based upon AI. So in response to these challenges, the expert group then devised 6 principles that we think not only applied at that time, but continue to be relevant today. And these were really the first consensus principles that were developed on the ethics of artificial intelligence for health. And I'll just quickly run through these. So the first principle is to protect autonomy, or ultimately that humans should remain in control of healthcare systems and decisions. And also this encapsulates the right to privacy and informed consent. The second principle is to promote human well-being, human safety, and the public interest, or essentially that AI should do no harm. The third is to ensure transparency, explainability, and intelligibility. So a lot of information is generated in both the training and the testing and deployment of algorithms. And that should be known not only to the companies that develop them, but ultimately to regulators and others who will ultimately depend upon these algorithms. We also know that there's a problem that often we don't know why AI algorithms make certain decisions. They are a black box. And so one of the ethical concerns is to what extent can we rely upon these black box algorithms, or what additional steps should we take so that they are trustworthy? The fourth principle is to foster responsibility and accountability. So we need to make sure that people who are responsible for developing and deploying AI know what their responsibilities are and they follow through on them. And that when mistakes occur, that we can identify where the mistake occurred and to ultimately assign responsibility and accountability to those who should have done differently. The fifth is to ensure inclusiveness and equity, which is to ensure the widest possible use on an equitable basis and to minimize bias, and to continue to look for ways in which an algorithm can behave in ways that excludes certain populations or countries, and to ensure that we can correct for those problems. And then the sixth is to ensure that AI is responsive and sustainable. I mentioned the concerns around the use of AI as it relates to water and to carbon emissions. But there's also, we need to make sure that when we're deploying AI, that it's sustainable within health systems and it's sustainable within workplaces, to the extent that we are sort of transforming and changing the way in which ultimately doctors and nurses and patients are going to have to use AI. So subsequent to that, we spent a fair amount of time then trying to sort of mainstream the principles and the challenges that we had identified, and Andreas will talk about some of that work and implementation. But what we had not yet contended for, we had an understanding that generative AI was being developed. But of course, as we all know, in late 2022 had been the emergence of ChatGPT and the first forms of generative AI. So on the basis of the emergence of sort of these new forms of artificial intelligence, the expert group then sort of spent an intensive amount of time to think through this emerging use of generative artificial intelligence, or again, applications like ChatGPT, and to try to think about what would be the right response, sort of in real time, as we were just starting to see in many ways people starting to test out and use these algorithms in ways that had not been anticipated, even perhaps by the companies who developed them. So I'm going to walk through a bit of this guidance, which was published in early 2024, and which in many ways has been perhaps the the guidance that the WHO has produced that has sort of drawn the most interest, because in some ways it was this form of AI that also drew the largest amount of public interest. So just a note on generative artificial intelligence. So what do we mean by that? Well, this is a category of techniques in which an AI algorithm is trained on data sets, and that can be text, image, or video. And it operates in a way in which it can take that existing information and produce something that's entirely new. And not only can it produce something that's entirely new, but it can take, for example, text. So you can put a text prompt into it and it can produce a video or can produce a picture. And this, again, is different than the types of AI that we were considering back in 2020 and 2021, because in those cases, you're just training an algorithm to do one thing or to do a few things. But as we know with, our use of ChatGPT and other algorithms that use generative AI, you can kind of make it do whatever it permits you to do. And that means that it can often be used in ways that a developer did not anticipate. The other thing that's interesting about generative artificial intelligence is that it is based on what are known as foundation models. So these are essentially very large models that are often being constructed by only large companies, though this is changing now very rapidly today. And on the basis of these large models, others can come in and build applications, or they can refine these models to use them in different ways that they think is appropriate or that they think would be useful. Okay. So one of the things the guidance does is it sort of charts out the different uses of large multimodal models in healthcare. And these were the 5 use cases at that time that we thought were relevant. So we see that medical providers are using it as an aid for diagnosis or even to assist in clinical care, whether it's a routine case or a difficult case. And again, hopefully in a way that does not lead them to substitute their judgment but to assist it. We see in the same way that patients and caregivers are using the internet or have used the internet to receive information, that they are simply dialoguing now with these generative AI models to be able to say, well, what is happening with me, and what can I do about it? And again, while this can provide an aid to individuals, the concern is that an individual suspends their judgment and simply relies upon a foundation model or a generative AI model that may make a mistake. We see that generative AI models are now being introduced into a range of clerical and administrative tasks to sort of speed them up or make them easier or help to make sense of a lot of information. We see that it could be an aid in medical nursing education. You can design a generative AI chatbot to pretend it's a certain type of patient and then have a dialogue with it in order to practice before seeing an actual patient. And finally, we see a lot of different uses of generative AI across scientific research and drug development, identifying new hypotheses, potentially helping to formulate graphs or to engage in textual analysis or even writing. And then finally, also in drug development, in which instead of building sentences or images with generative AI, you can build drugs. We also try to talk about a large number of the risks, and that, there's a lot of risks that we talk about with generative AI that's in the guidance. I'll just introduce a few. So one thing that I think people talk about very broadly now is that generative AI makes lots of mistakes, or it makes what are known as errors or hallucinations. And this can have real significance, because if you put something into the generative AI and it spits something out and you think it's correct, you may not know that you're actually doing something or you're relying on something that's wrong. We know that generative AI can be expensive. I think it was a month ago that OpenAI made an announcement that their sort of highest end generative AI models would cost $20,000 a month. So we can imagine that these may not be affordable, of course, if they are effective for many health systems and individuals. We also know that there's an accessibility concern, because they generally have only been trained in English and a few other languages, and can work in other languages, but may not work optimally. And as I was mentioning previously, there are these broader societal risks, including the fact that these generative AI models are very carbon and water intensive. So in order to try to think about how to govern these generative AI models, we thought that we should think about this as sort of a value chain, or a series of decisions that go from the development of a foundation model, or sort of that base model like ChatGPT, through to the sort of adjustment of that model, whether into a specific type of generative AI model that may, for example, may only focus on providing medical decision-making, or for trying to mine scientific publications, or in some cases, we see people just sort of shoving ChatGPT into a specific medical instrument to make it work differently. So that's sort of the second phase. And then the third phase is sort of the deployment of that AI model into a health system, into a company, or into a different sort of medical or scientific setting. And so what the expert group tried to do is grapple with how best to govern this development and deployment of an AI model across these 3 steps. And so what we have in the guidance is sort of trying to sort of deconstruct each of these steps. So in the development phase, when you're building the foundation model, what are the risks that have to be taken into account? And so we sort of identify the risks that we think apply. And then we think about, well, what are the responsibilities or obligations of the companies that develop these models? And what are the responsibilities and the obligations of governments that either have to create sort of competitive models that are developed in the public interest or to regulate the models that these companies are developing. In the second phase, again, where this is being fixed into a specific system or application, or it's being adjusted, well, here we think governments have to take control. They have a series of laws and regulations that are on the books or that they're developing that they can apply to ensure that they can address risks before one of these models is actually put into a healthcare system and to another setting. And so we list out all the different ways in which government should be enforcing certain laws and regulations and what risks they have to address. And then deployment phase, what we have is, again, an additional set of risks that maybe should have been dealt with before or have not been fully dealt with. And here, there are certain responsibilities that those who want to make use of these models have to enforce. And then again, also governments having to continue to regulate and oversee and ensure that these models do not cause harm and that ultimately they can be sort of maximized for their beneficial uses. Now, very quickly, and I want to make sure I get to Andreas, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this last part. We also produced a publication last year looking at the growing use of artificial intelligence in pharmaceutical research and development. So what you've seen essentially over the last decade is this enormous amount of capital and investment going into basically developing new medicines with the use of artificial intelligence. And this is reflected not only in the amount of investment, but also the number of companies that have emerged that are using artificial intelligence today. And our 3 broad top-line messages in this publication is, we think there are really interesting public health applications that use AI, and we're already seeing some examples of it. And these could be, for neglected diseases or antibiotic resistance, or for pandemic response. But what's happening is most of the investment going into this type of AI is really coming from commercial sources. And that means that ultimately the uses of AI are not really ones that are going to benefit the public interest, but really are focused on things that ultimately might sort of improve the commercial returns of companies. And we also think that there are a lot of risks associated with the use of this form of AI that are both specific to the pharmaceutical sector or that are well known with artificial intelligence. So, and this is just to note that what we already see today is that artificial intelligence is being used at every stage of drug development. And the way to think about AI is it's not that something's going to be developed end to end with AI, but most new drugs or vaccines that are going to be approved in the future will have been touched by AI at some point. And this just kind of runs through some of the different risks and challenges. And as you can see, these are very similar to the ones I was always talking about before. But we're trying to think about the concerns as it relates to the use of AI in the pharmaceutical sector. And that relates, for example, to bias, to safety, to responsibility, and to privacy. We also know that there are challenges with governing the pharmaceutical sector as it uses AI. We already know there's a lot of work that's being done globally on how best to govern the pharmaceutical sector. Once you bring AI into there, it brings a whole new layer of challenges that apply to this existing governance framework, whether how you manage the collection and use of data, how you manage intellectual property, both in terms of who controls algorithms and data, and then ultimately how you manage intellectual property for new medicines and vaccines that are developed, and ultimately how regulatory authorities can make use of artificial intelligence and actually monitor the use of artificial intelligence by the pharmaceutical sector. And now I'm going to hand over to Andreas for the second half of the presentation.
Thanks, Rohit, and a big thank you to the organizers for inviting WHO to this conference. I think for me personally, it's my 4th conference already. And it's great to know that you have already organized 10 of these conferences, which is really a great achievement. So also sincere congratulations to the organizers. So I'm going to continue with this presentation. And one thing that has happened after the publication of these landmark guidance documents that Rohit just described is that various technical departments of WHO and also technical areas from outside WHO have contacted us for specific guidance on the ethical issues that arise using AI in their field. And one of the departments that was very concerned with the ethics and human rights aspects of using AI was our healthy aging department. And they were specifically concerned that AI could actually exacerbate ageism and could really introduce also new forms of ageism. So specific concerns were that the AI design would exclude older persons, that actually the technology would rather be used for control than self-management, for example, in homes. And there was also a big concern that, you know, if in the future AI-based robots, for example, would do home care, that the human touch side of home care and also of, you know, clinical care would really be reduced. And the document describes a number of legal, non-legal, and technical measures that could be taken to minimize the risk of ageism in AI and maximize the potential benefit that you know, there are for older people. And yeah, we can't go into more detail, but you will have the presentation shared from us, and you can see the link here under all of our documents. Next slide, please. Yeah, so Rohit mentioned that we started to work on ethics of AI at WHO more than 5 years ago, actually. And so last year was the time to take stock and to see what we had achieved, and also to formulate a new strategy for the next 5 years. And so we consulted with our WHO expert group on ethics and governance of AI to get advice. And here are the 6 strategic priorities for the next couple of years. So one was to build and strengthen institutional capacity for this area, because there's still a lack of capacity in many countries. To secondly, work specifically on the ethics of the changing provider-patient relationship. I already talked about it with the elderly care. So there's a concern that AI will profoundly alter, or is already starting to alter, the way that patients and providers relate to each other. And that has to be examined further. Thirdly, there is a sense that we have developed very good ethical principles, but there are many legal issues that need to be considered, and also the ethical principles need to be implemented in legislation related to AI. Fourth, this area is really developing, as you know, very quickly, so we have to be mindful of the challenges and opportunities that come with emerging and new technologies, which are, you know, coming out every day, and that's often a challenge for you know, ministries and also for WHO to keep pace with this you know, rapid development. Fifth, the ethical considerations for the use of AI to treat disease and also support public health, or also scientific studies and other functions. And very importantly, number 6, to come up with case studies that illustrate the challenges, but also the successful implementation of ethical principles for AI in health. Next slide, please. Thanks. Yeah, so the key deliverables through this year and next year is for one, to develop a casebook on putting the ethical AI principles in practice and implementing them, reflecting our strategic priority number 6. The third one is to develop policy briefs, so specific guidance together with the technical departments at WHO on topics of ethics and governance of AI, for example, and we're working on 3 at the moment: neurotechnology and AI, the use of chatbots and the ethical issues that arise, and sorry, yeah. And then finally, there we are working on country implementation, so convenings, workshops, and country missions for capacity building. Next slide, please. Yeah, one very important guidance document that we are developing is on the AI-related health research and the ethical oversight that is needed to govern this research. And as you know, we have excellent international guidance, such as CIOMS or the Declaration of Helsinki. But what we have found is that many ethics committees and also researchers struggle with some of the newly arising questions through these new AI technologies. And this is why, almost a year ago, I think now, we have started to develop new guidance at WHO to address these issues and to give guidance to WHO member states, ethics committees especially, but also researchers on how to address some of these issues. And what is very important is also that we have taken an approach to not put the onus only on research ethics committees, but really also discuss the responsibility of researchers and other stakeholders in this area. We have a tentative date of publication, which is quite soon, actually, in June or perhaps July. But in any case, before the summer holidays, we would like to publish that document. Next slide, please. Yeah, so there are three different types of AI-related health research that we're examining in this document. The first one is data science research that uses AI. The second one is research that uses AI tools and technologies, for example, to identify, target, and recruit research participants in the study conduct or to collect and analyze results. And then the third type is research on new AI tools and technologies that should then enter the clinic, for example. Next slide, please. So why do we think that there's specific guidance needed? As I said, we have excellent international guidance, and the sort of Declaration of Helsinki was just updated. But there are a number of characteristics that AI-related health research has that makes it so special that we think we do need some additional guidance. So one is that there's an extremely short research to product life cycle. As I said, things are moving extremely quickly, and some of these technologies are also developed at a very rapid pace. There is a very low barrier to entry to conduct AI-related health research. You don't necessarily need a big pharma company, for example. There are some novel ethical risks with the use of AI. Some of them have come up with big data as well, but they're really magnified with these new technologies. There's also a blurring line between personal data and health data, which is of concern. There are a number of high-profile, ethically very challenging research pieces that have been carried out without oversight that you can find in the news. And there's also a challenge similar to some other areas like implementation research or quality control. What is even characterized as research, how the research is carried out, is changing with the use of AI. And then we know that CIOMS, for example, has a specific section on big data. And so there's some of these areas are addressed, but they haven't been, I think the last version is from 2016, if I'm not mistaken. So no wonder they haven't really been able to include in that version some of the very specific issues that have only arisen in the last couple of years. Next slide, please. Yeah. The other argument that we are making is that the research ethics oversight system currently is not fit for purpose necessarily for these types of new AI-related research. So one is that the regulation for the scope of research can exclude or ignore or is too vague the specific risks for AI. The existing standards, as I said, don't address all the newly arising risks, and the WHO AI ethics principles or other principles for that matter in AI have not been included or aren't applied. The operating model of research ethics committees is often not well suited in terms of how or when and where AI-related health research is carried out. If you think of some multi-country studies that basically aren't even are carried out entirely virtually in potentially 190 countries, who should do the ethics review of these kind of studies, for example. Then what we're hearing from many committees is that the REC membership may lack expertise or training and capacity for these sometimes very technical protocols. The researchers are also maybe not the usual clinician researchers, but sometimes people from programmers, for example, from companies that really haven't done much clinical research and are not really familiar with the ethical standards governing these types of research. And then there are a lot of third parties like data access committees, scientific journals, AI funders, etc., that are neither accounting nor managing the risks. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I think there will be a lot of questions on this guidance, and we already have a lot of interest from different countries, not only from the researchers, but also from the research ethics committees. And I hope that we will be able to develop an online training course as well, and then also to do some country implementation workshops. And perhaps we can work with some of you also to do some implementation and dissemination activities specifically in India. Next, yeah. So, so far we've talked a lot about our guidelines and guidance, but what is equally important for WHO is to make sure that we're implementing them, just as I just said now, the research ethics oversight guidelines. And so just a word on these activities. Next slide, please. Yeah, so for one, we have developed a WHO online training course on the AI ethics and governance guidance. So this is a 3.5-hour course with a couple of modules and checklists. It's adapted from our guidance. It has been tailored as an introductory course. We've had almost 30,000 learners already in the last 3 years from basically all our member states. And this course gives a certificate. You can scan the QR code here, but you can also find it online. So we highly encourage you to take this free course and get the WHO certificate for that. Next, please. Yeah, this is our latest course. So we have been working quite a bit with designers and programmers, and they have told us that they really like our introductory course on ethics of AI. But the question is really how to concretely include ethical considerations into the programming. And there they requested that we develop a very specific course that really takes the ethics by design approach. And that came out just a couple of months ago. It's a bit of a shorter course and very specifically for AI designers and programmers. Next, please. Yeah, and then we have done a limited amount of workshops, mainly in our regional offices at WHO. We have 6 regional offices and 150 country offices. Unfortunately, to be honest, we don't really have the capacity or the resources to do many of these, in-person workshops. But many are also done online today, and we hope that we can, hold many more of these this year, next year. Next slide. Yeah, I think one of the main questions that has come back to us and to the expert group is, as I said, we have, very widely cited ethics principles that we, developed and have disseminated. But there has been also a proliferation of other ethics principles. I mean, starting with our sister organization, UNESCO, which is doing a very important work on AI across all the disciplines, but also including somewhat health. So there are many, I would say, converging ethical principles that are out there. The question is really, how can these be implemented in practice, and starting with laws and regulations that somehow take up these ethical principles and put them sort of into writing, into law. And that is already a big challenge in many countries. And then what we also see is that many companies, in a way, pay lip service to having some ethical charters or principles that they proclaim, but in practice they're often not really implemented or even have been scaled back. Some of the ethics advisory bodies by companies have also been dissolved in the last year or so. Next slide, please. Yeah, so this is also for a discussion perhaps later. So one big question is, how can the private sector contribute to improving the implementation of AI ethics principles, perhaps via this ethics by design approach? What legislation, also regulatory oversight, do we need to integrate ethics into the development and deployment of AI health technologies? How can the health systems help with improving the adoption of AI ethics principles, for example, through the procurement, training, and the use of AI technologies? And then finally, of course, in ethics, civil society and patient organizations are always a key stakeholder for us in terms of a participatory approach. But how specifically can they help, and which role they can play to strengthen the appropriate use of AI technologies for health? Next slide. Yeah, and with that, I would really like to acknowledge our colleagues in the digital health department, because all we have been talking about has been very close collaboration with our colleagues in the digital health department. And finally, also, I'd like to thank our WHO expert group on ethics and governance of AI for health. And with that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, both of you, Dr. Malpani and Andreas. I think we will take the questions at the end, and I hope both of you will be there to answer those. Thank you very much, and then later we'll say talk about summarizing whatever was spoken.
Thank you.
Over to
Yeah,
Joy.
thank you, Dr. Nandini, and to the two prior speakers. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sibi K. George, who's a professor of philosophy at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. His area of interest is in contemporary European philosophy, and he writes on themes such as development, technology, pain, dying, political ethics, and subjectivity from a phenomenological vantage, emphasizing specifically on non-Western and Indian contexts. He is the author of Heidegger and Development in the Global South, and one of the editors of Cultural Ontology of the Self in Pain. He has extensive experience in research in partnership at the University of Guelph. He's also been a recipient of awards from the academic awards from the Shastri Institute, and currently he is collaborating with Professor John Rusin at the University of Guelph on the project of the ethics of teaching in pluralistic and unequal societies. Today, he is going to talk about the role of social sciences and humanities in responsible health AI. And the introductory note that he sent to us is certainly very eye-opening and will certainly, I think, enhance our knowledge today. Dr. Sibi, over to you. Thank you for this.
Thank you. Good evening to everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So, first of all, I congratulate the FMES IGME team for organizing this wonderful event, and also thank them for inviting me. I'm a philosopher, so I begin with a little bit of a preface on my perspective on the question of AI. I derived this perspective from the German philosopher Martin Heidegger. According to this philosopher and the perspective he gives, the modern era is an era of technoscientific rationality, and that supports human progress. In 1947, the life expectancy of an Indian was about 32. Today, it is somewhere around 70, 67 to 70. So this is all possible because of this perspective to a great extent. It is a time when human beings began to combine technology and science and transform the earth, transform the world quite irrecognizably. They were in full control of technology in the beginning of the modern period. But later, it appears that human beings began to lose control of technology. Because human beings themselves became the object of manipulation of technology to a great extent, it appears. The age of algorithms, the age of AI that we are concerned about today and in this conference is a development out of this culture of such a rationality. For me, it is important that we realize these mega cultural developments in order to understand the age of AI properly and to experience its power over us. From this perspective, even human abilities, simple abilities of the human being and the human being itself and our ability to understand the world, all these are dependent on the meaning frame or reality understanding of these epochal currents that are influencing our world. We cannot change them, but we can have perceptive ways of responding to such culture. We cannot ban or prohibit AI. That's impossible. In fact, our record of banning dangerous technologies is quite poor, I think. The atom bomb is still there, it is ticking, though we have not used it in the past 80 years. But something like other technologies like organ transplant or, surrogacy, all these are in various ways banned in different parts of the world, but they thrive underground the more we ban them. So perceptive scientists addressing the age of AI, perceptive scientists like, for example, the big scientists like Stephen Hawking, and many highly knowledgeable AI experts, there was a lot of uh, uh, attention on this in the last year. So many experts claim that self-learning, self-correcting, generative, creative AI can become smarter than the human being in different ways. It can swallow a lot of possible data available about the world. It can produce amazing content. It can produce convincing arguments. It can create lies. It can create conspiracy theories. It can misinform the public. It can disrupt social political life. In fact, our political life is to a great extent dependent today on chatbots. Therefore, to say that we are still in full control, we have full agency over technology, this type of technology especially, to me, it appears like a form of irrational self-belief, quite a bit of narcissistic self-belief. It is also uncertain whether AI is unequivocally bad or good. We are living in something like a science fiction time. We can imagine AI drivers today. We can imagine AI poets, AI script writers, AI programmers, coders, AI teachers, AI physicians too. Perhaps even AI nurses who can replace the whole human population of drivers and poets and others I mentioned. We cannot be too sure whether overtaking the human being like this is a bad or good thing. There is no use, therefore, vilifying AI. AI will have good and bad or evil sides, and human beings cannot shy away from AI anymore. That's not quite possible. Therefore, it is perfectly sensible to speak about responsible AI within this limited range of medical ethics, from within the epochal rationality, cultural rationality of our modern age that drives and sustains AI. So, the talk about responsible health AI is a way of responding to the cultural logic of our epoch of AI. We have no real ambition to change it, or we can only tweak it from within a little. The humanities and social sciences perspective is a critical perspective. It can contribute to the AI debate in these ways of understanding AI without deception, without glorification. And then we can also talk about responsible AI. So, what I'm going to say is not strictly normative ethics, rules about managing various aspects of AI in healthcare, which I think has been discussed a lot in the last presentation. Also, we saw that there are, for example, available a lot of guidelines today. 2023 ICMR document is there. NITI Aayog has the 2018 National Strategy for AI and 2012 Principles of Responsible AI, and so on. Government of India has the 2023 Digital Personal Data Protection Act, and the WHO's guidelines were discussed in the last presentation quite extensively. I had a look at some of these. Instead of these, I will talk about certain non-normative, larger issues that will help us, I think, with practicing and understanding and being aware of what exactly is involved in responsible AI in healthcare. I don't have much time. I will pick up one issue, two issues actually. The first one is certain aspects of public healthcare dilemma. So there are certain dilemmas in the use of electronic health records of private individuals, that is subjects of who are subjects of medical research or medical treatment or both. What happens if these records are used for non-health related purposes? That's one question I want to address very briefly. A lot of healthcare information is today amassed and analyzed. This can lead to better control of epidemics and quick screening of tons of data. Algorithms can make complex analysis very, very quickly, efficiently, effectively, and can be used to develop medicines and control public health hazards. But what if this data base is being used by the police? In such a case, we then move from a democracy of hyper healthy people to a totalitarian system. This issue is raised by, that, for example, the popular historian Yuval Noah Harari in his last year's book, Nexus. So if we want the democracy as we understand it today to survive, some inefficiency must be there, some chaos. In fact, liberty is also a bit of a chaos. If liberty of the individual is important, then effective and efficient surveillance of health too much of it, too effective, too efficient surveillance of health, or absolute kind of control of health is quite risky. If the efficiency logic is pushed too hard, it might be best to rely completely, for example, in the imaginative scenario, completely rely on AI doctors, AI physicians. They can be updated with information about new developments in medicine in split seconds, very efficiently. They can become aware of all information very fast and immediately and gather all data very quickly and analyze them. But whether a nurse can be so easily replaced with a nurse robot is a question difficult to answer because their profession is less about information analysis, but the doctor's profession quite a bit is about information analysis and coming to decisions about health conditions. If such huge database are used for multiple purposes, my health may be streamlined, my health may be effectively managed, but not my freedom. It must be therefore required that healthcare information must be protected from misuse. Sometimes in apparently innocent ways, this misuse can happen, such as the police needs the information for one particular case. But once healthcare information is available in the hands of non-healthcare agencies, then there is no end to it. It will always demand, these agencies could always demand for such information because it is an easy way out. Recently, there was a case of a murder mystery in the city of Kochi, and it was solved on the basis of a malleolar screw with a pit car number found in the skeletal remains of a woman, abandoned in a lake in a plastic barrel blocked with concrete. Police teams collected details about patients who had ankle surgery since 2016 in the city. They scanned medical information, medical records of all types in the city. And they solved the case finally. Using information for the purpose for which it was gathered, I think is important. But I think it is impossible to control use of information for the purposes for which it was gathered. This is something like a conundrum because medical information is apparently stored as anonymized information. But all anonymized information in the age of AI can be easily made non-anonymized. This is going to be even easier in the future, apparently. So that's the first set of dilemmas I want to pose before you. Another one, the dilemma of AI for medical interventions. So here I am going to speak about dilemmas in the use of AI for the discovery and development of new drugs and improved treatment. So today it is quite clear that all AI algorithms can help in the discovery and the development of new drugs and improved treatment protocols. This they do by analyzing large data sets through large language models of deep learning. While human experience and expertise take hundreds of years to develop and analyze, AI can do in a short span of time and much more efficiently, perhaps. But historical data, it's fed with. Through sharp analysis, AI can predict molecular interactions more accurately. AI can tell us accurately what targets are likely to be responsive to treatment. All this can help reduce the research cost of pharmaceutical industries and publicly funded projects. AI can more accurately read and predict microbial structures and their behaviors, which is crucial for innovations in treatment. They can simulate models of medical equipment with razor-sharp accuracy. These uses of AI are already in the upswing, apparently, in the industry. But there are several problems with AI use in drug discovery, such as non-transparent data that, the previous presentation spoke about, the black box of AI. So this kind of information is efficient, but it's not explicable. It's not properly explicable for human medical interpreters. Another problem can be the problem of bias, which also was discussed in the previous presentation. There can be systematic biases of human society, which are reproduced by AI, couched in the neutral machine language of its results. These biases, one scientific article I read says, could be found in unrepresentative data sets or through AI models that overrepresent some populations, organizations, countries to the detriment of others. Unquote. The biases in medical AI in drug discovery can be geographic and demographic, such as, the Caucasian population overrepresentation. AI can be biased towards well-off people in well-off countries who can afford medical care. One example pointed out in literature is regarding AI-based melanoma prediction models, which, as you all know, is a form of cancer, skin cancer. The data set, as in melanoma project, is biased heavily towards light-skinned, I'm quoting from an article, light-skinned images from patients in the US, Europe, and Australia. So the writer says this is imbalanced sample bias and does not predict well for persons with darker skin colors. But one may still argue that some of these biases are unavoidable in any study, whether AI-based studies or human studies. However, there need to be a concerted effort to mitigate these biases and minimize their impact before these models developed through AI assistants are brought into actual medical practice. When we treat algorithmic bias, an article says, when we treat algorithmic bias as a simple technical issue, we have only engineering solutions, but without solving the real problem, which is the inequalities of data and values, which is the ethical problem. There is actually, my point here is not really these problems, which are well known and well discussed in literature. There is a bigger problem: data integrity and unwillingness to share data among big pharma companies. They are unwilling often to share their clinical data, the clinical trial data. This is again well documented. RBCC.com reports, I quote, whoever is best able to utilize every individual's digital health record, fed by his or her data OME, data that utilizes the open microscopy environment or OME framework, will capture significant new profit pools and disrupt existing ones. So there is a prediction about, traditional pharmaceutical industries being, outsmarted by the new information-based industries. So big tech giants like Amazon and Microsoft and Apple will take over even pharma giants like Pfizer. This prediction is there as, these traditional industry players do not know much about data mining, or they are still new in the field. But our question is this data war equal? No, it cannot be. Clinical trial data is increasingly produced by the special commercial interest of pharma companies and not by public interest. This is again quite well documented. So an important aspect of AI ethics is in healthcare is what interests create biodata and AI tools, and what kind of interests are taking care of our health and producing narratives about our health and management of our health. And it also involves being constantly vigilant about these interests of profit, messing up and tweaking the system of medical science, medical research, and medical, aids that are being produced, medical AI. So these systems are being tweaked from within the systems themselves by these special interest players. Whether this can be attended to, I don't think it's easy, but I'm raising this. There's never easy and never unambiguous. And to that extent, our ethical dilemmas continue, but we can be constantly vigilant in responsible AI use, is what I think. To conclude, there are several aspects of AI in healthcare, such as assistance in diagnostics and robotic help in patient care. They can all be similarly discussed, taking into account several aspects that do not immediately meet the eye. And the perspective of humanities and social sciences is helpful to bring these very aspects to light. Thank you so much. I invite your questions.
Thank you, Dr. C.B. George, for that very interesting perspective. I must confess that the framework is entirely new to my understanding. I think it will lead to very interesting discussions today. There have been a few questions in the Q&A post in the Q&A section. Shall we start with those first as we go into the discussion?
Yes.
Okay. The first question over here is for Dr. Andreas. Having more ethical guidelines creates more implementation challenges. Why not simplify the guidelines to increase adoption?
Yeah, thank you. That is a very good and pertinent question. Yeah, it's also a very hard one.
Yes.
I do think we need very specific guidelines on the one hand, very detailed guidelines. At the same time, maybe what we're not doing well often is to produce short material for easy digestion and adoption. So things like 2-pagers or maybe tools for ethics review committees, checklists, these kind of things. We are probably not doing a good enough job. So this is actually a very welcome reminder to us as we are finalizing this guidance on research ethics oversight, that we, which will likely be again a document of more than 50 pages, that we will make sure to produce also more easily digestible material, perhaps checklists for the research ethics committees and so forth. So thank you very much for that question and suggestion. Over.
On the lighter side, I would say that, the experts like us sitting in the ethics committee are like the ashas that were presented in the earlier session, not knowing what to do with that, and like we may have to resort to experts in the field, but how many experts do we have to actually? So I was just wondering whether, AI related projects, whether it should go to a special ethics committee, which has trained people, to give the answer, or have the facility to call for the experts to give the answer, very responsible RECs. Like I would say that, ethics committees are of different types. The level of quality varies. So why not give it to an ethics committee which has undergone quality review? We have 3 agencies. One is from the US, it's called the Alliance for Accreditation for Human Research Protection Program, AHAP. The other one is WHO initiated, you would have heard about it, Sitka for CAP. And then we have in India our own group from the Quality Control of India sector, NABH for Ethics Committee. So the ethics committees which have been qualified, which have undergone these surveys and come to a higher level, only these ethics committees should deal with such projects. That's what I would feel, that the participants would be better protected comparatively.
Rohit, would you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll both have a point of view. So it's interesting you bring that up because just yesterday we were discussing this very point about what's the right way forward and, what's the balance between specialized committees, as you're noting, or sort of capacitating existing research ethics committees. And the answer is probably a bit of both. But, I think one remark we received a few months ago is we still see sort of AI and its use in scientific research in the different ways we outlined as somewhat exceptional today. But we're very quickly moving towards a period at which it won't be exceptional. It'll be integrated throughout. And so I think, there's maybe this transition period right now, where, as you say, you may want to have sort of specific committees that can really ensure for the highest risk research, assuming you're, saying, okay, this is of a highest risk, we should move that over to there because we want to make sure we get this right. But I think at some point we're going to have to find a way that, research ethics committees across the board can engage in this, even if you don't get the science, right? Like I don't know the science and technology, but I can certainly say, oh, well, that's a clear risk. You need to go back and think about that carefully before you move ahead with your research. And then also recognizing that research ethics committees can only bear so much of the responsibility, that researchers have to do more, and all these other mechanisms we have in the research ecosystem have to do more also.
Yeah, thank you for that. The next question is related to education. And the question is, as a medical teacher, my concerns about using a chatbot for teaching medical and nursing students is, number one, there is a risk of encouraging shortcuts in learning and teaching by both medical students and the teachers. I know we may start by saying it is an aid and not a substitute, but will the camel in the tent situation occur? And then later there is a related question on conflicts of interest between companies which provide these chatbots and regulatory agencies, and leading on to a question of financial capabilities and access being restricted based on that. On the other hand, as a physician who trained more than 35 years ago, the volume of knowledge which is available now for training has dramatically increased. Textbooks have expanded, people are expected to know more. In that kind of a scenario, how much do we expect to teach our undergraduate students? Like, there is still that same 4.5 years and a year of internship. The time to train a person has not changed, but the quantum of knowledge has changed, and the speed at which new knowledge, technology, etc. approaches has changed dramatically. So given these, there is a certain inevitability of bringing in these kind of aids and to improve services. And that's a personal opinion. Rohit, would you like to?
Let me have Andreas answer this, as he's an actual doctor who went through medical education and can speak to this more. So I'm going to defer to Andreas on this.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks for that question. So I think what is clear is that the universities will have to step up education on AI. That is very clear. I think what we are seeing is also some new types of specializations. We have, I think, some universities in the Netherlands that have started to offer mixed degrees of AI and medicine, because some of the questions are so complex that you basically need a double, education. And I think that is certainly a trend that we will go see, expand in many countries. But in terms of the ethics review members, that's also true. You know, we need to educate all the ethics review committee members on these new technologies. As Rohit was saying, that for the future, you know, all the research ethics committees can actually review these types of AI-related studies, because they will somehow always have some kind of component in the future. Is very much likely. So education of, you know, various stakeholders in this area is really key. Over.
I just to add one thing on the chatbots, I apologize for interrupting. Fully agree with the risks that were outlined. And certainly in a way we could potentially be pushing people into relying more and more on chatbots and engaging more in automation bias by using this as a training tool. And you know, absolutely, you know, we're still in the process of developing a policy brief on chatbots, and it's not just the conflict of interest, it's the amount of control and power that companies who design these chatbots can really make decisions as to the types of information it's conveying and the way in which the chatbot operates. You know, it's really how we, as you're saying, we have to find a way of organizing and providing knowledge much more, you know, I don't know if the right word's efficiently, but in a way that actually accounts for this disparity now between the amount and the time. But then who's making that decision as to how that information is presented, what information you see, and ultimately, you know, what is valued versus what is not. So in full agreement with the question there.
Thank you.
It also raises the question of, you know, the students these days are resorting to chatbots.
Yes.
And then, you know, when they are submitting some assignment and things like that, it's just like, you know, we test for plagiarism using softwares. So similarly, some institutions have started to pick up, whether this was with the help of the chat GPT and things like that, and they are actually not accepted. But this will become a usual feature in future, actually. But these are some of the features which really raise alarm, because this may not be actually checked in many of the institutions which do not have that capacity to, you know, implement this. So that is a point of concern, actually. And
Dr. Nandini, it is, sorry.
no, it's fine.
So it is not only students, there are also clinicians who are using AI on ad hoc basis. It's I think for ChatGPT is some $20 odd, so people feel that it's not too much of a hit on the pocket. I think the correct term is shadow AI. It's not official, it's not declared. The institutional policies say no, but people, you have a mobile phone, you have access, and then you ask questions. So there is already a leakage of health data and personal health information into these large language models already. To Dr. Sibi, there are a couple of questions. One is, I think any one of us can take that question. Would AI nurses or health workers be able to extend empathy along with techno service, given our rapid progression into the into adoption of technology and the benefits that we have seen from it? And the second point is, it's on a different note. The danger of sharing health data for non-health use that Dr. Sibi has highlighted fits into the concern from the previous sessions earlier in the day, where other data is being used for governmental control for or business interest to take control of our bodies and the economy, the digital economy, which is behind this. Dr. Sibi, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I think I have no answer to either of these. I will only comment that we would like, at the moment, you know, humanity everywhere, whether in India or elsewhere, we would like being treated by other human beings, being cared for by other human beings. But whether this will be the case if AI develops, I'm also thinking a little bit futuristically, because there's a lot of literature on this today. So whether humanity will behave in the same way, I have no idea. I'm open. I think tomorrow we may not value human touch as much as we value it today. Yeah. So whether nursing profession, physicians professions, all this will change. Teachers profession, mine. Whether all this will change tomorrow, that's an open question. And tomorrow we will have an ethic which will say that machine teaching is quite good. Yeah. So that's one. I see. Should I go with the other question
Yes,
also?
please.
The other,
Yeah.
yeah. The Aadhaar related question again. This I posted as a full-fledged dilemma. When the police say that we want to crack a case and please give us the information, who can hold back that temptation to give the medical data and non-anonymize it? This happens, I think, very, very often these days. Medical data is one, but any kind of data, railway tickets, all these are being used for these purposes. But medical rate data, which was collected as promised to be anonymized information, can it be used for even cracking criminal cases? If we go that way, I'm suggesting, and not me alone, several writers have suggested in the recent past that we are up for a full-fledged non-free society if we go this way. Yeah, so that's the dilemma. I have no solution to it either. There are other questions for me, should I?
I don't think there are any further
No.
questions, but the question about the nursing.
Yeah.
I recently heard a presentation where somebody was presenting about the emotions that are expressed by humans is not expressed by the robots. Interestingly, autistic children don't understand emotional expressions, but the robot, they are actually able to, for example, an autistic children who doesn't want to take a particular food is responding to the robot asking the child to take food, and not the human who is asking the child to take the food. So what is the connection? There is a connection. And then the child, when the mother asks, when the child is crying, the mother says, "Why are you crying now?" No, "I want that robot." That's the reply. So whether there is a connection between that, emotionless caring, I really don't know where we are heading.
To add a dimension to this, yesterday's discussion, yesterday some of the speakers talked about mental health apps which can be used, and we had a person who spoke about it. Given that in our own country and around the world, trained mental health professionals are hard to come by, and there is a shortage and there's an increase in mental health disorders and situations, where there is no access possible, would it then be something is better than nothing, right? So, I mean, you have to think of the guardrails, the development, the whole cycle, but to miss out on an opportunity to give somebody a conversation which, or an opportunity to converse or externalize or exteriorize certain emotions and thoughts, would that not be beneficial? Yeah, Dr.
Yeah, and I think that you're hitting the nail on the head, and I think not just for chatbots, but for many forms of AI. I think what gets not lost in but is sort of sometimes hidden away is not all chatbots are created equal. And so, part of the issue here is there are older versions of chatbots that, may not allow somebody to, as you say, externalize or voice and sort of have more of a dialogue back and forth, but it does provide some level of care. The problem has become that there's a sort of very aggressive push into these, especially with the use of generative AI, that does provide more of that facility, but then raises many more risks. And so I think what's getting lost in here is these are, as you rightly say, ways of sort of extending health services in ways that otherwise is going to take a very long time, but without having the right guardrails in place to really account for the fact that when we talk about mental health or, for example, sexual and reproductive health, we have to be much more cautious in the types of AI technologies underpinning these chatbots that we actually are utilizing.
Yeah, and I think there have been examples in the very recent past of people who have been persuaded to self-harm or to harm others through some of these interactions with bots.
Yeah, they optimize actually to respond to specific emotions. It's no different than an algorithm on YouTube that sort of pushes you further and further in one direction. It's the same underlying principle.
Yeah.
There's a counter argument to this. Can I raise that?
Please.
That, there are people who say that, we think that AI is programmed. There are people who write about human beings that is equally programmed. We are genetically programmed. We are, culturally programmed. We are affectively programmed. So if we go by mere programming as a kind of, negative argument against AI, it could be put back at the human being also. But there are some questions to me like non-normative. So I only want to, actually I'm a misfit here, but I only want to, raise this idea that, sometimes at least we should look not merely at, written down rules and what are the best rules that are there to follow. That they're good, they're extremely important. Yeah. Without those, without the ethics committees, what would have been the world after, Second World War misuse and all that. But sometimes, these become very mechanical. The ethics committee practices and, the rule following and, what are they called? The consent forms, all these become mere documentation. And, whether, physicians and the ethical practitioners and nurses, whether they are actually taught, habituated in ethical practices, that's a question. Yeah, I think there are questions to me, but I think our time is up.
Yeah, our time is coming to an end. I was just thinking for Dr. Sibi's earlier proposal when he said atomic bombs and nuclear bombs are still persisting. So should we now look at some non-proliferation frameworks for AI too? Who's going to police the system?
I was suggesting that it may be impossible because it will go underground. That's why within the system, we can only tweak it. We can have the guidelines. We can have people, some kind of policing might be necessary. But more than that, atomic bomb is a very specific object. It has many other uses, atomic energy uses for health and, energy production. Those are okay. We are using them even today. But AI that way is very, very diversified. It is going to affect every aspect of life and culture, whether media, whether medical practice, whether any aspect of culture we think about today, it's going to be affected by it. So it can't be banned. It can only be tweaked. It will be very disobedient. Let's be prepared for that. But it can't be controlled too much. That's the way I think about it now.
And just to add, I think, by the way, I really liked the analogy, of course, with nuclear weapons. I think the other things to recognize, and this is obviously changing with nuclear proliferation now, but the barrier to entry for AI has been lowered significantly in the last 3 months. So I think a lot of people saw the headlines with the emergence of a generative AI model from China. And with open source models. So we're talking about really this is flattening out very quickly. And I think that is distinctive from the use of nuclear energy. I think we know now that the sort of global governance mechanisms we've had for nuclear proliferation are eroding, but at least they exist in some respects, and we don't really have that for AI. And this is one of the things that I think the WHO is grappling with. And then underlying AI is not just this idea of the competition in a way, it's a technological and commercial competition that doesn't necessarily exist with nuclear weapons. And I think that problem and the way in which companies are going to push as quickly as possible, irrespective of some of these harms, is one that I think governments aren't necessarily going to control because they also see that to their own advantage.
I think we are past our deadline. Dr. Nandini, do you want Dr. Andreas or Dr. Sibi, any concluding comments that you would wish to make? And then I'll request Dr. Nandini to close.
No, if it was to me, I think I'm done. I
Okay.
had my concluding comment.
Dr. Andreas, any comments to conclude?
No, thanks. Just to say, this has been a really great session with fantastic questions. A great discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Nandini, would you like to wind up the session?
Yeah, it was really a privilege to be one of the chairs of this session. And it was a very interesting session. And definitely, Andreas, I'm going to do one of those courses that you have highlighted, because I really want to get to the bottom of this, and not, walk around like an ignorant about AI. Thank you very much, all the speakers. And I thank my co-chair also and the audience for their patient listening. And I declare that this session is closed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the
Thank you
best.
very much.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Hi everyone. I hope I'm audible. Thanks a lot to Dr. Joy, Maman, Dr. Nandini Kumar, and the speakers for this fantastic session. I'll just take 2 minutes to say that the 2 points that Dr. Nandini raised, including the use of AI in scholarly work, including teaching, writing, publishing, etc. That is something that is also up for discussion next week when we meet for the conference. The other point, very importantly, that Dr. Nandini mentioned is about about how people with psychosocial disabilities might be interacting with AI tools. That too is something that is being discussed next week in a session on AI and marginality. I hope all of you will join us for the session. What you see on the screen is a poster for a session that we've just released notification for. There is a conference workshop that is coming up on 2nd of April, just a couple of days from now. It's free to register. The link is on the screen. The QR code is on the screen. And I hope you all will register for this as well and give the kind of amazing support that you've been showing for the conference. This is on the use of AI in forensic medicine and how that works for the criminal justice system. Something that I believe is very, very under discussed at this moment, but also something that we will be grappling with very soon. With that, I would like to also bolster a request for funding and donation that we at the IGN have been making for quite some time. As one of the organizers of the conference, frankly, only we know what has gone in sort of putting the conference together and how we've put it together on basically a shoestring budget, a shoestring that has been cut short to the point where you can't tie the laces anymore. But we're trying our best. And as a Platinum Open Access journal that's really driven towards keeping the knowledge that is produced free to circulate and free to publish, we would really, really benefit from your support. Kindly, put in the donation if this resonates with you. And I just want to finally mention that the registration for the conference is still open. We've been getting some requests regarding whether people can still register. The answer is yes, you can. Please do circulate the posters that are going around. The registration link on the website is active. And with that, thank you very much for joining us this evening. We look forward to seeing you next week with another fantastic lineup of speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye, ma'am.
Thanks, Nandini and Joy.